All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Peah, Pedig Vav, Halacha Zayin, and Halacha Ches. We're going to be learning the final daf in the 6th chapter, daf Nun Zayin. And we're going to start with the Mishnah, right? 7 lines from the top of the Amid. Also, Halacha Zayin. The Mishnah is going to tell us more situation in which produce is not, subject to the law of Shikha. And we're going to spend some time discussing here in Peah. We have a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim regarding produce that's tamun naturally. Yes, we learned before that if the ani covers, let's say, a bundle with straw, and the owner walking by forgets the bundle because it was covered by the straw, it was hidden by something external. We learned l'kula alma, it's not shikha. Here, the Mishnah is speaking about a product that's naturally hidden. There are many vegetables that the food part of the vegetable grows on the ground. Not all vegetables grow on the ground. We make a hadam out of banana also. But generally, vegetables grow on the ground. Some of them are completely hidden in the ground. Just like we have by grain, not only is there shikchas oimer, but there's also shikchas kama. And we already explained the same applies to all other areas where there's shikha. So if you are harvesting garlic and you skip over, you forget a bulb of garlic, but it was tamun. So the question is, do we say it's not shikha or is it shikha? We have a machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda holds that tamun is not shikha. The Chachamim hold tamun is shikha. And the Gemara is going to go and contrast these opinions to a topic that we have in Bava Kama, Daf Samach Aleph. There, we're going to be speaking about damages, specifically fire. I'm telling people every now and then to go back to get to the Yankees. So what happens is like this: if I start a fire in my property, right? These are from the Arba of Nezikin, and the fire goes into your backyard and it burns. The Torah gives it burnt kama, or hagadish, or sasada. The pasuk gives 3 examples. The question is, what happens if it burns your heap of grain and in it there was buried, you hid your stuff. It was a great hiding space. Burying things in the ground was the way you have to, a shoymer has to guard money by burying it in the ground. But when it comes, I have a machshir, I have a keli, and I want to hide it, you stick it in the heap. You stick it in the grain heap, in the gadish. What happens if my fire burnt down your thing? Am I chayiv? Am I not chayiv? And the Gemara is going to point out that the shitas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim are mamish reversed between here in Peah and there in Nezikin. So whoever holds that Talmud is excluded, which is Rabbi Yehuda, not subject, he's going to hold by Nezikin and made that a person who lit a fire not only is chayv to pay for the grain heap, but even for the kalim that were hidden, buried, concealed inside the grain heap over there, you are going to be chayv to pay. It is included. The Chachamim here in Peah that they argue with Rabbi Yehuda and they hold that a natural tamun is included in the dinei shikha. If the owner forgot the garlic bowl, it will be shikha. It's included. The Chachamim, we paskin hold over there in Bava Kama by Nezikin that tamun is excluded from Nezikin, and the Gemara is going to want to figure out why are the shitos reversed. And another good principle we'll see that in as much as in Talmud Babli there was a lot of svara in Yerushalmi, in Babli a lot of svara in the Yerushalmi. The ikir are the sources from the psukim. In other words, we're not going to give a logical difference, and there are many logical differences. We will speak it out when we learn the sugya. And here we're going to mainly just speak about limudim. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, they have different psukim here in Peah. They have different psukim over there in Nezikin. Very simple. And, you just follow how the limudim come about. That will be the sugya of halacha zayin. The final halacha of Pedig, Shishi, of Pedig Beishamai, the final Mishnah is going to speak about harvesting at night, or if a person is being ma'amir at night, or a blind person. In other words, they can't see and they forgot. There, Lakula Alma, whatever you forgot is going to be subject to shikha. And the final topic in the Perek will be about a person who makes a tanai, he makes a precondition. Prior to harvesting, this person says, Hare ani koitzer almanas, tamash ani shoicheyach, whatever it is that I'll forget, I'll take. Now, normally we learned that on one hand, you cannot be masna mashakosav atoyra, tanoy bottle. On the other hand, we have a cloud that by dina de mamoina tanoy kayim, one might have argued a dina de mamoina. We'll see, no, it's not dina de mamoina, as we'll explain. Or I don't care that it's about finances, things, items that you have to leave for the poor. Such a precondition will not be valid. That will be today's daf. And now, Chavra, let's go jump right in. Right, daf nun zayin, 7 lines from the top, halacha zayin, beginning with the numish. Says the Mishnah, Tua shenitna lashachas. Literally, the Mishnah is saying grain that was already given for animal fodder. What are we talking about? So you should know that we learned this above already. One of the things that needs to happen to grain prior to you harvesting it, it has to be dried out enough for it then to be edible for people. One of the reasons why at the end of the growth you leave it in the ground is because you do not want it to be moist. We also learned above a big cutoff point, especially when it comes to Trumas Umaisis, regarding did it grow at least a third of its potential or not even a third. This shachas is not connected to the third, meaning even if the grain grew until a third or more, but if the person harvested it the way it sounds, not only did he harvest it while it's still moist, because he wants to give it, he plans to give it. The Mishnah, the words are shenitna, he gave it, or he gave some of it. That means he was megala, not only with kavana, but through his maisa, that he gave it for animal food. And the key of our Mishnah, according to the Marafulda and many others, is that only oichel is subject to the laws of shikha, oichel meaning something that's designated for human consumption. Since this farmer is designating his grain for animal consumption, which is what shachas means, and for the animals, you don't care for it to be properly dried out. So as we'll see, if during the harvest he forgot a batch, it won't be subject to pay. Similarly, we're going to learn pshat aluma means for binding. Binding means that there was a stalk of grain that he harvested for it to be used as a cord, as a string to bind other sheaves. In other words, this area of the field was not harvested for human consumption. It was harvested for another purpose. And as we'll see, the fact that it was not harvested for human consumption excludes these kamas from the din of shikha. Also to point out that even though the first case sounds like literally shenitna lashachas, that it was given for fodder, that your kavana alone is not enough, you have to actually use some of it lashachas for the remaining of it now to be classified as not for human consumption. La aluma doesn't sound that way. And indeed, we'll see in the Gemara, Mistama, I'm suggesting perhaps that from the la aluma is megala for shenitna lashachas, that only kavana will be enough. Like by the aluma, you were harvesting this area to use them as strings. And now we're going to go to a whole different type of reason for exclusion. If you are harvesting, as an example, stalks of garlics, but they still will have to be made into a larger bundle, which means that the way this farmer is gathering them is he plucks out a couple from the ground and he puts them into small bundles, but ultimately he doesn't want them to be in small bundles. He's going to gather the small bundles and turn them into bigger bundles, large bundles. When did he forget the bundle of garlic? When it was still in the small bundle. It wasn't the final bundling. We had mamish similar scenario above in the Masechta when it came to grain. As we learned, that shikha is either kama, or when it is in its final bundled state, and you are gathering it from the bundling area, to the Gavish. That is the only place where it's subject to Shikha and not prior to, which is the case over here. Well, actually, let me just go back. Igudei Hashum means that you're going to use this garlic to bundle another garlic. You're using a garlic as a string, and va'agoidas hashum b'habit solam is the way I just explained. I made a mistake. I confused one with the other. Va'agoidas b'habit solam means that they are in small bundles, but you plan to make them into larger bundles. So the Mishnah gave 4 cases. In all of them, ein lahem shikha. Ein lahem shikha. But as we are learning the pshat in the Mishnah, that the first 3 cases are not shikha because they are not harvested for human consumption, right? Either for animal fodder or strings for bundling other grains, or the garlic itself will be used to bundle somehow another garlic, or that's one reason. The final case in the Mishnah, that's for another reason, because it's not in its final form. It's not in the final bundle that you forgot. You plan to bundle it again, and only in the final phase, if you forgot it, then will it be shikha. So that is the reish. Now, next case of the Mishnah that we spoke on in the introduction. All produce that's naturally hidden, tamun, in the ground. And when we speak about hidden, it doesn't mean that there's no foliage. Where's the Gabbai who's going to correct my word foliage? It doesn't matter if there's greens above the ground. The food part, the oichel of it, is fully hidden. You don't eat that. You cut it out later. Going, like, for example, luf. We're going to learn luf is a certain type of onion. V'hashomar garlics, solam, I do no regular onions. It's the edible part is fully underground. Foliage. That's the correction. So in Nachum person, so Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, ein lahem shikha. They are excluded from the din shikha. However, v'chachamim oimrim yesh lahem shikha. And this is very important. In other words, guys, we learned it was 10 daf ago, on daf mem zayin amud beis. We learned that produce forgotten on account of an external factor. The case the Mishnah gave was that aniyim, they wanted more shikha. So what they did is they took straw and they covered your bundle with straw. The Mishnah says it's not subject to shikha. In other words, whenever something is covered by something external, but not in its natural habitat, there is no machlokes. It's not subject to shikha. Here, why do we have a machlokes in the chachamim? Because it is in its natural habitat. So before we come back to the sugya of Talmud, first, Amar Rabbi Yoina, as we explained when we learned the Mishnah, that the word shenitna lashachas implies, the literal translation is that some of the grain was already given. Now, that which was given is not shikha. We're talking about that when you're going through that part of the field and you are harvesting the kamas, if some of them were given, you would learn that way, for animal fodder. So the fact that you did it, that now changes the status halachically from all the other grain, that it's now shachas. And as we learned, anything that's not harvested for human consumption is exempt from the laws of shikha. Says Rabbi Yoina, it's not only in that case. Of course, it's in that case. Rabbi Yoina doesn't only, the Mishnah doesn't have to end with when you actually gave it. But even if you only had kavana, kavana alone is going to be enough for you to classify it as not animal food, as shachas food. And I think that l'choyra, what was Rabbi Yoina's raya from la'aluma? Not shenitna la'aluma, but la'aluma. La'aluma means you're harvesting it to use the stalks for strings. Kavana is enough. And we have this throughout halacha chevra. We're learning now at Rambam. We are right now in the end of Chodesh Nisan, Tavshan Pei Daled. We are not yet up to a muktzah. That's towards the end. We didn't even begin carrying. I think today's prakam is 10, 11, 12. Yeah. And Danny. No. 7, 8, 9. Yeah. Today's 10, 11, 12. Anyways, just an example by muktzah, right?
12, 13, 14.
Today's 12, 13, and 14. That's what it is, because 13 begins the hilchas of carrying. Thank you. So when you have a stone, just an example, which is muktzah, machmas, atzmoi. Is designating a stone to use it as a door stopper prior to Shabbos enough to remove its muksa status? We're going to read, no, you have to make something physical on it, even if you only make a little mark. In other words, you have throughout halacha some areas that machshava alone is enough. You have other areas in halacha where you have to have a maisa, and that's the whole bar. The chiddush of Rabbi Yoina is that here only machshava moyeles to change its designation, which will may have a big effect. It removes it from shikha. No, it's not the anis, it belongs to the balabais. Okay. Says the Mishnah, the Gemara moves on to v'chol hatmunim. Let's use the words excluded, included, not to get confused. So here in Peah, Rabbi Yehuda holds that all of the naturally hidden products that during harvest, shikchas kama, you forgot one or two, Rabbi Yehuda holds they are excluded from shikha, which means that they retain under the ownership of the owner, farvas, because it's hidden. And the Chachamim hold that tamun is included in shikha. That's the way it is. God made it that way. If you forgot to harvest that bulb of that onion, then it belongs to the onion. Says the Gemara, I got a problem. I have a contradiction. And a parent stated, bein Rabbi Yehuda, bein Chachamim. Over there, that's Baba Kama, Daf Samach Aleph, Amid Beis, the Gemara, and Babli records a Mishnah. If you set fire to a Gadish, and as we learned together, we're speaking about someone who kindles a fire on their own property. That's important. But with Beruach Metsuya, something that should have been foreseen, the fire spread to a neighboring property, and the chiddush of the Torah is that's psukim in the Torah that even though I did not directly burn it in your property, I'm not a mazik biyodayim, right? I lit a fire by me. The fire traveled. I'm chayiv for the damages. Question will be what happens if not only did it burn down my neighbor's gadish or my neighbor's gadish. It doesn't matter how far it goes. And the Torah gives three examples. One of them is Gadish, so would have been explicit. I'm chayiv. What happens if you have kalim that were hidden in it? And you're speaking now, it could be something very expensive. It's not about it could be. You have kalim in there, regardless the value. Rabbi Yehuda over there includes tamun. Rabbi Yehuda oimen mishalim, not only for the Gadish, but kol masha b'toich. Givaldik. Look inside the last maraful, the vafilu tamin, because Rabbi Yehuda is the shita that's machayiv mamish the words tamun by eish. That is Rabbi Yehuda. Turning to the Daf Zainam days. However, the Chachamim say no, that ein mishalom elo gadish chitim or gadish sa'idem. So I clear. We have now our contradiction, and the Gemara is going to address each one by themselves. And I can tell you right away that if you think about the difference, you can come with many logical reasons for either parties to be machal. And maybe kana makim, just a chazer, one of these classic sugyas that we learned in Baba Kama that comes up often. I know the Mishnah here is on Daf Samach Aleph. But if you remember, Bava Kama Daf Chav Beis, we have the machloikes between Rabbi Yechanan and Eish Lakish regarding the chiyuv of Eish. This is very important, and that is that what is the chiyuv for Eish? Why am I chayiv to pay if I actually did not burn your gadish down directly? That's more hezek biyadayim. I lit a fire on my property. So Rabbi Yechanan holds Ishai. Rabbi Yechanan holds Ishai Mishum Chitzioi or Chetzioi, right? Which means that just like when I shoot an arrow, even though I shot the arrow, I shot the gun in my property, it doesn't matter. When the arrow, let's speak about Hezek of Mamanas, if my arrow makes a hole through your wall, if my bullet makes a hole through your wall, I'm chayiv to pay. And the Chiddush, the Gemara over there explains the challenge with Rabbi Yechanan is that there's a koyach acher mu'urabay, because unlike by an arrow, if I direct my arrow towards your wall, my power in the arrow, through the arrow, was mazik your wall. When I light a fire in my property without the wind blowing the fire to your property, the wind never would have burnt anything in your property, and I did not blow the wind. The wind is a koyach achar mu'urabay. These are the words we had over there. But anyways, nevertheless, Rabbi Yechanan doesn't care about that. Ishay mishum chetzye. That is, Rabbi Shlakish says, no, because of the koyach achar mu'urabay, he rejects the chiyuv of being like an arrow. He says it's like the toitus machabish, that if my animal gores, right, my property, so since I lit a fire, it's considered my mammon, my property damaging your property is something that I'm chayiv to pay. Remember that whole topic?
No, but even if there was no external force, fire just generally spreads. It moves. You don't. Correct.
Let me say even better. Let me say even better. Go to, okay, when we have these words over there, because the Gemara in the phase. So why doesn't Rabbi Yechanan say mamoina? You know why? Because he says that mamoina is something mamashasdik. I think it's similar to what you're saying. Fire ain't by mamasha. Even without wind, it's not something that you can say I own. There's no mamashasdik. You remember, we're going to learn again by Shabbos that if I only carry a flame, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not chayiv chatos. I might not even be also. No, we're speaking about just a flame. Because it's not substantial, and that was a machlokes. And let me just go further, Danny. What did we learn with the Nemuka Yosef? That's the big Nemuka Yosef. Asks Akasha that according to Rabbi Yechanan, that Isha Mishum Chetzyoy, how can you light? One of the Sheva mitzvahs that Rabbanon is to light Neder Shabbos Kodesh. Remember that? How can a woman or a man? The house has to be lit up. It should be shalom bayis. You shouldn't, you should not stumble on items that in the dark you'll stumble upon. How can I light if ishay mishum chetzyoy means if fire is mamish my extension, it's my arrow. How can I light a candle Friday night when my candle is burning in Shabbos and mishum chetzyoy? Remember that, Danny? And what was the answer that the Nemuka Yosef gives? He says, yeah. He says, Isha mishum chetzyoy. Now think about it. If someone shoots an arrow, what was their involvement in the damage? When was their involvement in the damage? Let's call this at T1, at the moment that they actually shot the arrow. Even though it took the arrow 10 seconds or 10 days, it doesn't make a difference to reach the destination. By the arrow, I'm chayiv, but what is mechayiv me? My shooting of the arrow at the time that I shot the arrow. So therefore, when it comes to Shabbos, I'm allowed to do a malacha before Shabbos. When I lit the candle Friday night, when did I light the candle? Erev Shabbos. The fact that it's burning on Shabbos, the Isur of Shabbos, the Mechayev is to be Mechalal Shabbos. I'm not being Mechalal Shabbos. I'm not breaking Shabbos. I'm resting on Shabbos. I didn't light anything on Shabbos. Is it my fire? Yes, it is. Is it my arrow? Yes, it is. But it goes at T1. That's the Nemuka Yosef. Why am I saying all over this? Because when it comes to Hezek, which is the topic that we're bringing about over there, that Rabbi Yehuda, let's say, is Machayev Tamun, right? Or the Chachamim Exen Tamun, I think a big topic of Hezekis will be, am I Chayev for the action that I did, or am I Chayev for the result? And that's really the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. You can argue that we spoke all this out when we learned Baba Kama. In other words, if I'm chayiv, if the machayiv is the pu'ula, not the nifal, then I'm more removed. And there will be a logic to say, as we'll see soon from the psukim, that since the Torah does not speak about anything that's hidden, the Torah gives 3 examples. All of them are things that are exposed. That I'm not chayiv. If I'm chayiv for the nifal, which will be the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that is machayev tamen be'esh, is because by hezekah you can say it's not about what I did; it's about the result that it caused. It's about the result. The biggest raya is, let's say, if a person is not shoyim his ox, and the ox did not do any damage, he's not chayev anything. His responsibility was to guard his ox. You're not chayev for you're chayev for the consequence. You're chayev for the consequence. But forgetting is a whole different thing. Forgetting is the only mitzvah that you fulfill it by forgetting. You're not doing anything. You're not doing anything. It's a non-doing. And as we learned on Daf Mem Zayin Omid Beis, you can argue that the moment there's something external hiding the item, you can't say you forgot it. It wasn't the you who forgot it. So it's, forgetting is the pu'ula, not the consequence. The consequence was the garlic was forgotten. I'm just giving sfaras that you can argue, let's say with Rabbi Yehuda. By shikha, it's about the you that's forgetting. And therefore, since the earth was covering the garlic, you did not forget it. It was forgotten from you. It was hidden from you. When it comes to damages, Rabbi Yehuda is machayev tamen be'eshes because Rabbi Yehuda is machayev the result. The Gemara doesn't go this way in the Yerushalmi, which is we're seeing this.
Just limudim.
Just limudim. Okay. Now let's get
question
now
on.
Yes.
All right, question on onion, carrots. When you plant them, you know they grow underground. So how do you actually not know? You already know, and you plant them in a group. So to begin with, it's that location is known to grow stuff underground already.
You're asking a kasha b'chlal, how can people forget things? You knew it. If you never knew it, you never forgot it.
But I mean, they set aside an area for, in this case, for onions.
Same thing with and grain. How do you forget grain? How do you forget your keys? How do you forget your glasses when it's not sitting on your nose? I don't know. People forget. Okay. So says the Gemara. Let's go to Rabbi. Answers the Gemara. Tamon. Rabbi Yehuda excludes Tamun by Peya, includes Tamun by Nezikin. So over there, the pasuk that we have in Mishpatim, and if you want to read the whole pasuk, take a look. If you have your Torah Oira Shalom, like you say, it's the age. Umatza'a koitzim denechal. Listen to this. Gadish, three things. Oy hakama, oy hasade, shalom yishalom hamavedes habe'eda. So says the pasuk. Now let's go back to our Chazal. When it says v'nechal gadish oy kamam, the question is memash b'shenemar kamam. Ein onu yedim shagadish b'chlal. In other words, when you have the gadish, what do you think the gadish is made out of? The gadish is made out of the same grains you have in the kamam. You're not adding anything. You're speaking about when the grain is in one setting, in another setting. Why was it b'chlal needed? So Talmud blamed Gadish. Why did the Torah have to give another example? Now we're not even going to the Hasada. We're going to the second example. Rabbi says there's an added example to be marbe, even that which is hidden. In other words, he has a source from Scripture that includes Tamun ba'esh. So let's go to Psukim over here. What's the pasuk that we have over here that we keep on quoting from Kiseitze, Kisiksoy, Kisircha, Bisodecha, V'shachachto Emer Basodeh. So says over here, it says Sodecha. Sodecha means, as we had in the year we just learned Friday, right? Open, Bigoloi, Pravo Tamun. In the field, not under the ground, on the ground. Bisotcha. I know that base means in, but that's the way we're teaching over here, the base. You know, it's the default is revealed. The default by Nizikin is also only which is Goli. Look inside the Marab, full the 5 lines from the top. You have to have an extra limud to be Marbe Talmud. V'hacha says the Marab, full the Li'in Shikha, Sadiq the Mashma Begoli, the Ein Kan Riboy, and therefore Mima'atin on Tom. All of that works for Rabbi Yehuda. Now we have to go with the Chachamim Punkt Fakir. That now, this is the Kasha, that Mechalfa Shitosin, the Rabbanon, which is Tamonin and Omrin, over there by Nezikin, the Chachamim exclude Tamun. And V'cha, over here, Poi, by Peya, Inun Omrin, that unlike in the Mishnah that we had on the Mem Zayin Amud Beis, where there was straw that was thrown on top of the bundle, here, where it is in its natural habitat, the Chachamim are Marbe Tamun, to the din of Shikha. Which one is it? Also, Limudim. Answers the Gemara Tamon over there. We just read the 2 words. He goes further. You're telling me there are 2 Limudim. No. Well, the Torah has to give one example. Kama. Problem is, the Torah adds 2 others other than Kama. Oya Kama, Oya Sada. The last one is Sada. We just learned that Sada is a Mashma Begilui. And that's why the Torah gives a 3rd example. Ma Sada Begolui, Afkol Shu Begolui. Problem is, why do you have to have Gadish? And in the Gemara, in Babli, the Gemara remains with Akash. Unresolved. Here in the Yerushalmi, we're not even spending the time to explain it. Maybe because it was self-understood somehow. Anyways, but over here, you're right. In other words, everyone is agreeing that the word Sada means Begali. Here in Kiseitze, Kisiksa Ksircha Bisodecha. Sodecha means Begali. Begali is Prat L'Tamu. Problem is that the Torah says Kitzircha. The Torah could have says Kisiksa Bisodecha. Think about it, if you know the Holy Tongue. If you cut in your field, of course you're cutting Kitzircha. So the word Kitzircha is vited, an extra word. And what do you cut? What do you cut, guys? Not what do you pluck out. You can only cut that which is above the ground. So now we have this other general rule that two positives are a negative. Right? When two people are together, the way it normally works is that one is positive and the other one is negative. And you should know if the people around you are too negative, it's because you're too positive. And mamish badekamanusa. If the people around you are always so negative, I promise you, go ahead, you become the negative guy. You'll make the other person become the positive guy. So it's your fault. Two positives. No, it's when it's too positive, not two number two, when it's not TWO, when it's TOO. I'm a big grace English speller, Mr. It's just TO. I think it's TOO. Then when you're too positive, you create a negative. Everything is just wonderful. Those irritating people. All right. So here we go. So now, in other words, they are, or second, two positive, negative, two negatives are positive. When people are too negative, some people think, I'm such a positive guy. Look at me. There's no one like me. I'm the most positive guy. You know why? Not because you're positive, because the people around you are too negative. They should get all the credit. You don't get the credit. But people around you are too negative. Now, all the positive people are getting very angry at their spouses. I know exactly what's happening. When they're so negative, to survive, you got to be too positive. You got to balance it out. So, by Rabbi Satamun. No, there's a two miyot because Satcha, not Tamun, Kitzircha, not Tamun. That's very logical. When God says something, when someone says it, so I mean, if a person insists, this is the way it is, I promise, it means it's the opposite. Whenever you insist on something, it always means the opposite. Ido is having a very interesting moment right now. I'm not talking the positive, negative. I'm talking about people I think who around Ido are so negative for him to be so positive. But there's this word. When you insist on something, why are you insisting? Because the emes is the opposite. You can't handle the emes. Keep on insisting. Everything is wonderful. Everything is wonderful. Everything is wonderful. Okay, let's go back. Halacha ches. Final halacha of the Perek. Hakoitze balayla. So halayla is a whole different thing. No, it's speaking about a person that they missed a patch because it was dark. Now I know that the Mishnah does not say Hama Amr Balayla, but as you will see in the Gemara in a moment, the Gemara learns that the issue of Ma'amr, that of our Mishnah, is also Balayla. So again, it was forgotten because of an external factor, but not like on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis that someone covered Mem Zayin Amud Al, that straw was covering the. It's dark. Or Vasuma, person who's blind. In all of these three cases, as the Mishnah, yesh loy shikha. It's always subject to shikha. You harvest at night. That's what Kevin was saying. You knew you're doing it at night, so look out. Look out for what you're cutting. If you forgot it, you forgot it. Why is Danny smiling? Because that's what Kevin was arguing when it came to the carrot. He says, you knew that the carrot is in the ground.
I'm smiling because I think it's
because you think what?
I didn't see the question at all.
Danny doesn't even see the question. See, that's the beauty. He's that smart. It's not that he has the answer. It's not even a question. He's irritated that you have a question. Now, another thing. If someone who's harvesting, let's say maybe it's at night or there's some other impediment, so the person lechatchila decides, I'm not going to even make an attempt to go pick up the little bundles. there's some difficult in seeing what's going on. I'm only going to pick up the large bundles. And what happened was you forgot one of the large bundles. It's not subject to shikha. Because shikha is only when your intent was to harvest the whole field. If you lechatchila, remember we learned is only one point of shikha, when it's shikha soimet, which is
pass by us.
When it's in the final bundling state, and you're going to take all of this to one final heap, from the imarim to the gadish. That's where you have shikha. This guy is going to go through the field twice. He's only picking up the big ones. Let's say it's at night, or there's a reason why the guy says, I can't do this properly. Let me do something. There's no shikha on any of it. And by the way, the Gemara is going to say not only ain't no shikha on the thick ones, there's no shikha on the big ones, there's no shikha on the thin ones. Shikha is only shaykh when you're going through the field with a kavanah to gather all of the bundles. And the final din of the Mishnah is this: your mas namash about if a person says, doesn't matter mental, it doesn't even matter if he says it verbal, prior to harvesting, he knows he's a klutz. He knows he forgets things. So he says, that mash ani shechayach, I want to have the right to take it. I'm not subjecting myself to I'm going into Shabbos almanas that I can be machal guy. No, yesh my shikha. Your precondition is garnishment mish. Even though normally by dinner the mamoina you can make a tanai. No, you can't make a tanai. Well, let's read it out. By dinner the mamoina you could make. There is some chiddush over here. So there's two ways of looking at it. Number one, dinner the mamoina is not for me to steal your money. Like dinner the mamoina that God says lo signite. So dinner the mamoina I can make a tanai. I'm making a tanai that I can take your money. Number one. Number two, it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. So just because for the ani it's a financial gain, when you lend me money and I pay back money, that's a dinner the mamoina. If I have to leave that which I forgot, on me it's a mitzvah. It's not every mitzvah is a dinner the mamoina. Tefillin also costs me money. Very good. That's the word. No, the word is not because it's the honest, because it's not a mamoina. It's a mitzvah. Okay. First of all, Kenya Masnisa, Hakoitzer Balayla, even though the Mishnah never said the words Ma'amar Balayla, like you don't understand what's the case of Ma'amar. The correct way of understanding it, the Mishnah Rabbeinu HaKadosh spoke out Koitzer Balayla, and he meant Ma'amar Balayla, and in other words, all three cases are very similar. Suma is similar because for him everything is dark. Bein Bayoim, Bein Balayla. When the Mishnah says Yemayim is Chaven to take the thick ones, so again, you would think that if you forget one of the thick ones, it's not shikha. The Rabbi Yoina is adding not only if you forgot to take one of the thick ones, it means that none of them are subject. Don't only apply the Mishnah to a case where you forgot one of the thick ones that you only plan to take the thick ones. You extend it further, even to all of them. In other words, since you're not planning to take all the bundles. You're saying, I'm only taking some and not the others. There's no shikha at all. Afilu dakin ein lahem shikha.
Is that like a workaround? You can use that as our Rama to just say, all right, guys, time to harvest the field. Only harvest the thick ones.
Could be. Okay, you're right. You can make arama. You can cover stuff externally. You can do all sorts of shtick. Okay. Now, when we learned Amar Hareli Koitz Ramanash, that what? He makes this big statement that Mash Ani Shechayach, whatever I'll forget, Ani Noitel. The din is Yesh Lo Shikha. Why? Because Shehisna Masha Kosav Batoida. Cholamasne Masha Kosav Batoida. To know your bottle. Look inside the Rashid Elio. Right, we spoke this out by heart. Right, 4 lines before the bottom on the left side. Chutz Midavar Shabamamin. In other words, we know the din of Kol HaMasna, but we also know that there's an exception. Now, the reason why a Davar Shabbat Mammon you can make a Tanai, that Rashid Elio says, V'tama mishum de matzi machalei. That's the reason. He didn't say because it's a mitzvah. He says because which side by a Davar Shabbat Mammon can make a Tanai, the side that is going to lose. There was a midin toida. I have a certain right. like a woman who gets married. Let's learn she'er ksusanoina. Let's learn is the 3 chiyuvim. So she's supposed to get mezainis. If she agrees not to get mezainis, he makes it. I'm marrying you, almanas. I don't have to give you mezainis. So it's tanoi kaim. Why? Because she at any point can be moichelet. But over here, which ani is being moichelet? Dinner the mamoinas for me to, like I said, loy signoif. I'm making a tanai that I could steal. No, doesn't work that way. So that's it's a din of the mamoina. So where did I get it? It's a mitzvah. I read it somewhere. One of them farshim over here. The Pnei Moshe. And so the Pnei Moshe doesn't learn like that. Ashadilio. He says no. The last, chalamas the dafka b'davar shuva mamin tunay kain. V'hache yimel mitzvahs asay alei ramya. He doesn't say the word of the Rash. He says a new word. He says what we said. It's not about that because it's money in the wrong direction. It's not about in the wrong or in the right direction. It's not money. For the owner, it is a mitzvah. He's chayiv to leave what he forgot. It means he'll lose money from it. But it's not about that. It's about him leaving his shikha. And therefore, and on that we say, Hadran Allah, God willing, we'll come back to you, Beis Shammai. When Mashiach comes, we're going to paskin like Beis Shammai. We're going to all come back to Beis Shammai.